Hey everybody, I'm Robert Donovan. Welcome to this episode of Not Trekonomics. Now, in the introduction video, I said the words I used were minimal starting income. In this episode, I'm going to define exactly what that means for my situation and go over the process of getting from there to post-satiety. I do not come from money. After an ill-timed, ill-considered, and poorly researched real estate purchase in Alaska in 2006, which I made with my sister, and the subsequent loss of two high-paying jobs in the crash of 2008, I have been basically unemployed or underemployed ever since with no degree. In 2011, I came back to California, basically doing job search and couch surfing operations, and then moved into a 1988 RV, which my uncle gave me the money to purchase after an interesting story there. He offered to put me up in an apartment for 6 months, clearly not aware of the insane rent here in the California Soviet Socialist Republic. But I told him, hey, a better way to do this would be if you can give me the money to buy a van or an RV to live out of, it'll be a one-time expense and I won't bother you for anything ever again, which I have not. And he thought I was nuts, but it has, in fact, worked out. I nicknamed the van the Serenity, moved into it in 2012 to avoid the insane rent. As I said, here in the lovely California, which I refer to as the California Soviet Socialist Republic. Anyone who lives here will know what I'm talking about. I did get a job about that time for minimum wage plus 25 cents per hour. A promotion since has gotten that to minimum wage plus 75 cents an hour. And all the time from, say, 2011 through 2015, I was trying to resolve the situation with the banks concerning the loans on the Alaska properties. Finally, in late 2015, as the banks began sweeping my checking accounts, I decided that owning a house is not worth decades of indentured servitude, declared bankruptcy, and gave up all the interest in the properties that I have, and have since been and intend to remain debt-free. The experience was a bit of an epiphany for me in that it made me realize that all I had been doing up to this time was working my ass off to make everyone but me rich. Right? Those lessons were hard learned, but they were learned. The other lesson was that the banks, once they get you in a loan contract, couldn't care less about your situation. But many people today, I know a lot of people at work, and many of them feel trapped and unable to get ahead. They're frustrated and they're feeling just powerless to get off this treadmill they find themselves on. They hate their jobs, but they fear losing them because they're dependent on their paycheck. They depend on their paychecks thanks to things like student loans, mortgages, credit cards, or some combination of all three. And many young people who bought into the narrative of high school, college, well-paying job to follow have found out too late that the market demand for degrees outside a STEM field, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, will not usually generate the income needed to pay off the crushing student loan debts that can't be easily discharged through bankruptcy. Now, we are going to be doing a video on options for people suffering from the tyranny of student loans, but that's another video. Now, these people, I really do kind of feel sorry for these, and I'm 52. They're kids to me. I remember when I was that age, I didn't have any debt, didn't want any. These people, these poor guys and gals are saddled with just ridiculous amounts of debt, and I don't blame them for feeling a little bit bleak. I really don't. The schools, have not prepared them for anything in terms of real life. They're toiling away at menial jobs, waiting tables, working cash registers, scrubbing toilets, driving delivery vans. They're forced to live at home, effectively enslaved to their possessions, if not to the banks. Those who can afford a house face mortgage payments, which will eat up most of their savings for the next 15 to 30 years. Credit card payments often finish off the remainder to the point that raising $400 in an emergency in the U.S. requires most people to borrow from friends, according to a recent Federal Reserve survey. The welfare state is now larger than it has ever been. Is that any real surprise? The number of government employees exceeds the number of manufacturing employees by 1.8 to 1. After some $15 trillion have been spent on the war on poverty in the U.S. since 1964, poverty, of course, persists and the promised utopia still eludes us. Common thread here. Dependency, whether on an employer or a government or a bank, is not freedom. It's serfdom. And the most self-reliant serf in the world can't get free of a master they depend on for their very survival. Unless those serfs decide to think outside the box and change the state of play. This show is about doing exactly that, going outside the norm to create personal economic abundance and create a post-satiety economy that functions like the one portrayed in Star Trek. I know that sounds crazy, but believe it or not, you really can have it all. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, with wanting to have it all. But you have to start right. And the key to that is not to play the game like all those people I just described, like the mindless consumer that banks, corporations, and politicians want you to be. There are ways to live frugally without giving up quality of life, or to reduce or avoid the rent trap and gain the peace of mind that comes from not having to chase money. And I gotta say, that's one of the greatest things about living in the RV. Moving in the RV was how I did that, but that is not the only way. We're gonna just explore a number of them on this show. Autotelic learning techniques. That is self-directed learning. They can get you a very good self-directed education, very lucrative self-directed education at a fraction of the cost of college. We're going to look at when college is a good idea and when and how to avoid it and still get a high-paying job. We will also explore different ways to assess and manage risk using a technique known as mathematical expectancy to help you to create income that is independent of an employer. You are not powerless to make things better for yourself, even if you're starting at the bottom. That's the other theme on this show. There is opportunity all around us right now, this second. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, though. The path that you have to follow to get to it is sometimes challenging, not easy, and not always pleasant. This is not going to be an endeavor for those who are at their best only when the going is good or easy or convenient. That doesn't mean it's all going to be this hard, grueling slog, but some of it will be, and you got to be mentally prepared for that. And it's going to take a mindset of very fierce self-reliance, personal responsibility, rational analysis, and individual effort to get through it. People may laugh at you. They may look down on you. You may think I'm crazy talking about we're going to make a Star Trek society here, but hey, as I go through the series, I hope to convince you otherwise. But people may look at you, they look down on you, they may try to guilt trip you for being exploitative or greedy. Ignore them, or if possible, get them out of your life. Because the bottom line is people like that are not your friends, and they just want to make you or keep you broke and powerless like they are. They are leeches. Scrape them off. Just because they can't succeed doesn't mean you can't. And who the hell, by the way, is anyone else to tell you that you can't or shouldn't try to make a better life for yourself so long as you earn it by offering fair economic value in trade? And who the hell are you to let them get away with it? Instead, seek out people who are genuinely supportive of your success. This show revolves around the idea of capital formation. Now, we'll explain a little more what that means in the next video, but poor people, there's a saying, poor people tend to spend money on consumables and save nothing. The middle class spends their money on debt and their savings on interest, and the rich spend their money on things that make them more money and save constantly. Now, the fancy economics term for deciding to spend money to make more money, that's capital formation. That's all it is. Now, the act of doing the actual spending is called investing. And a pile of money set aside for use as capital is called a capital base. So those are kind of the three foundational terms, and you're going to hear in this show a lot. Now, the basics of creating a capital base, shockingly simple, folks. Here they are. Make more money than you need to be prepared for emergencies, and spend less than you have to avoid debt. No college degree required to do either one of those, by the way. Imagine for a minute that we could, in fact, teach everyone in the United States, or maybe even the world, to create a capital base that covered their basic survival needs, defined here for our purposes as food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. And let's assume we also taught them to do it for themselves so that they were not dependent on any other person or agency. This is not universal basic income. This is a universal starting capital base. There is no such government program anywhere in the world right now. I have ideas for how to start one, which I will be putting in later videos. But the bottom line is, if you want to do this, we're going to have to start by doing it ourselves, which is possible, but you have to have some basic knowledge first. But if we could get everybody to that point where they had a capital base that covered their basic subsistence needs, that food, clothing, shelter, and transpo, you would have a post-subsistence society. Now think about that for just a second. If everybody had that, losing your job would not mean risking homelessness, hunger, or being unable to put gas in the car to look for another job. You might have to, cut back on some luxuries like cable or Netflix or eating out a lot or until you got another job, but your basic food, clothing, shelter, and transpo got them covered. And now with a job and this post-subsistence capital base, your capital base could cover, say, the cost of learning new skills, so you could increase your income by increasing the economic value you have to trade. You could also live frugally on just income from your capital base, put all your wages into the capital base to make it bigger, therefore it puts off more income, and you effectively buy yourself a raise the following year. You could do any combination of the two you wanted, in fact. Now, once your capital base got big enough to pay for your preferred level of, shall we call it, acquisitive satisfaction, you'd be in a condition of what is post-satiety, the point at which earning more money doesn't really motivate you anymore because you're pretty much happy where you are and you've got everything you want. And that's going to be different for different people, and that is fine. That's one of the things about this program that I am suggesting, which is better than a universal basic income, because it's not one size fits all. It's you make your own. Now, at that point, once you got to post-satiety, your decision to take a job would depend less and less on monetary compensation and more on whether you thought the work was interesting or worthwhile. Now, at some point, as remuneration becomes ever more an object of indifference for a greater and greater number of people, money would cease to be the driving motivator, though it would still exist and still be used. If there was a clear path by which, let's say, everyone could start at the bottom and create and grow that capital base, if that was supported through government action or some other private means, then you would have to the point where people could get to the point of they could see a clear path where, okay, I come into the job market, I come to the United States as a legal immigrant, and if I work hard, I can create this capital base and basically have it set up where at some point I will be able to basically live the life of a wealthy retiree and not have to wait until I'm 65 to do it. Right? If everyone could do that, we would have what I refer to as a post-satiety society, and it would look and operate very much like the one in Star Trek. In such a world, skills, expertise, and reputation for honesty and integrity would become more important to your social and professional standing than your personal net worth. Because in a world where everyone's wealthy, it doesn't impress people that much that you've got a little more. So where are the personal capital bases in Star Trek? Well, two devices in Star Trek actually create the majority of the capital in Star Trek. Now, the Star Trek writers don't know jack about economics, and they don't make economics the focus of the episodes because that would be kind of boring. I get that. But there are two devices which would serve to create the two probably most important types of capital in a universe where money becomes no longer the driving force. That first one would be the holodeck, which is a personal autotelic learning device, and that creates human capital, right? Enables you to get any skills or knowledge that you want, hands-on or theoretical. And the other one, of course, is the replicator, which creates physical capital, goods you would use to serve other people's needs. But capital is capital. We don't need no stinking replicators or holodecks. The process of getting to post-satiety has 5 major steps, which we will be expanding on in this series as we go. First, scrape off the leeches I mentioned earlier. Second, get an income stream. Third, generate savings. Fourth, use those savings to buy things that make you more money. And 5, repeat that process until your capital base is big enough to pay for everything you want. Now, before we go any further in this series, I want to kind of take the next video to make sure we're all speaking the same language, because some of these terms, you may have heard them in other places used in different ways. So we're going to cover some basic terms as used on this show. and look a bit more in detail at the process of getting to post-satiety and the biggest obstacle we face to make it hard to do. That will be the next video. Let me know your take on all of this in the comments below, and please feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and as always, may the balance of your day be awesome.